There we go. Hey, thanks everybody for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got some people that are on virtual, and we still have some people that are supposed to show up. But I'm happy to welcome Pat Craig today from Tennova Healthcare. She's a licensed clinical social worker with Tennova Behavioral Health Services, right? Get it right?
Long name.
She is currently the manager of social services for their inpatient and intensive outpatient program. She has practiced clinical social work in Cleveland for 35 years. She's a transplant from Georgia, and she went to Hiwassee College in Madisonville, Tennessee Wesleyan, and graduate school at the University of Georgia School of Social Work. So thank you for being with us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Hey, everybody. This is old home week, if y'all haven't noticed. Well, a couple of us have known each other for years. So, okay, I'm going to try to stay in front of this camera. You're going to give me my cues if I get out of bounds. I came with an agenda, but I always like to tell folks I'm flexible. So I'm going to start with what I think is important. My topic today is on resilience in today's pandemic. And I'm going to go through a few things, and then I'm going to stop and I'm going to be asking questions. And if any of you've ever been in any of my classes, and a couple of you have, I know Linda and Melissa both have, I'm interactive. So I'm going to invite you to comment. I'm going to invite you to ask me questions. And if you want to just flag me down, do so. Okay. If I derail, I have notes. You'll understand that. And some of you will understand that in a few years. Some of you are probably already with me. Okay. A good friend of mine. For those of you who have known me for a while, you know I'm an avid Lady Vol fan, right? Mm-hmm. Pat Summitt was a mentor, professional colleague of mine, as well as a mentor. And I really love her. And she coined a phrase at some point during her tenure at UT, and it was called left foot, right foot, breathe. Okay, left foot, right foot, breathe. Now I was going to wear this today, but I couldn't find anything to match it to put over it, so you couldn't see it before I was ready to talk about it. So I didn't wear it. I couldn't understand why it was left foot, right foot, breathe, because I've always heard it right foot, left foot, breathe. Have y'all? I think it really fits the pandemic because we're all out of step and we're all off balance. And I think what we have to do is we have to do the left foot, right foot, breathe through this change. I take comfort in the fact that there have been lots of other illnesses and major events across the globe that have affected people. And look at what we did with those. I think we are a resilient population. But I think somehow as our lives have been so disrupted over the last 2 years that we forget that. We forget that we are a resilient people, that we can do things to take care of ourselves, even in the midst of a crisis that has literally changed everything that we're used to. There's some pointers I'd like to go over. Anybody disagree so far? Okay, because I'm open to disagreement. And this is going to be the first kicker that I'm going to throw out there. We are making too many references to when this is over. What happens in your head when you focus on, well, I'll sure be glad when this is over? What are you doing every day that you say that to yourself?
Setting yourself up for disappointment.
Exactly. We don't know the future. We don't know whether this is going to end abruptly, whether it's going to drag out for years. We don't know. And if it ends abruptly, there's probably going to be another one behind it. I mean, it's just a big world out there. And we're all over it now as a society, or as societies. There's more than one. We're all over the globe. And we're going to transmit things, not just illnesses, but other things, okay? But if we constantly live in a state of, when is this going to be over? We're putting part of ourselves on hold, and we're constantly in a state of what I think is grieving for the way
way it used to be and where I want to get back to. And we were constantly doing that. I realized that in church when every Sunday the preacher kept saying, well, we're going to get to phase 3 here in a couple of weeks. And you just kept reminding us that we're having to go through all these hoops. I don't need to be reminded. I know I got these hoops to jump right now. I'm going to jump them. I love you guys. I'm going to take care of you. And my part, I'm going to do. Okay. So I want us to think about what we think about and how we cast today. Because if we always think about getting back to the way it used to be, or we think about when is this going to be over so I can start my life again, we're forgetting to live in the moment. And we have this moment. And we're not promised any other moments. Most of you would agree with that. Okay. So some basic skills that I want to remind you of. I call them, and some of I've got you some handouts, so you don't have to take notes or anything, but behavioral activation. I do not know where in the fact that when we went through the biggest part of the isolation, people were saying they just had to live in their house. Well, no, your front yard is fine. Your backyard is fine. You know, you can go for a walk in the woods. The trees don't care if you might spread COVID. You know, we isolated ourselves to a great degree that we didn't have to. And I think we're beginning to realize we can get out and do some things. We've just got to do some different things around it. We need to mask when we're around people. We need to keep the social distance. We need to wash our hands a lot. Of course, nursing's been preaching that for years, okay? So I want you to really think about your mindset. We can adjust. We can be resilient. We can get through this, but it's going to be a left footer. We're going to start with our left foot. We're off balance in the scheme of things, but we can adjust our walk. And that's what I want you to do. I want you to learn to adjust your walk so that you do the left foot, right foot, breathe. And then I want you to do some affirmations with yourself. When you think it's so bad, I can't handle this, or I can't stand this, or I just want this to be over, I want you to think about what's good in this moment. I love getting out today. I came across and I thought, oh, the sun's out. It's cool and crisp. The trees are turning colors. Did you notice any of that on your way in today? The other day when it was raining, did you notice the smell in the air, the freshness? It was sloppy. It was wet, but there was a comfort in that. Did you notice it though? Or did you just wish it was over? I enjoyed, there was one Saturday recently when it rained, and I thought, oh, this is like at home when I was in high school, and I had a rainy day and I didn't have to do anything, and I loved it. Okay? So I want you to think about a lot of how we cope is what we're thinking. I call them the ant infestation. Automatic negative thoughts. We can get inundated with ants. You have 90 to 100,000 thoughts a day. How many of them are negative? How many of them are about things that are beyond your control? How many of them are about things you can really change? Remember the serenity prayer? Okay. What can you change? What can you fix today? And that's where you focus your attention. Mindful living is about living in the here and the now. I can't bank on what's going to happen tomorrow, and I can't live on what I used to do. I got in an argument at the general store with a gentleman one day, not an argument, but just kind of a like, are you kidding me? But we were total strangers, and we were at one of the, I think it was in Bell Buckle, and we were paying at the cash register, and I love to be surrounded by these old things, because what it reminds me of is how resilient we are. He said, oh, if the electric grid, he was forecasting that the electric grid was going to go down, okay, across the US, and everybody was going to die. And I was like, now, wait a minute. I said, but what happened when the Pilgrims came over? They really didn't come with an electric grid. Okay, and they survived. And what happened to all those years before electricity came about? I mean, my family, my mother's family had coal oil lamps. They did not have electricity. My youngest aunt was, the day before she was born, my grandmother was without the black kettle over a fire doing the laundry in a pot of lye. Okay, and she's only 83 or 4. Okay, so we're not too far removed from a time when we relied on our resources, and we may do. And this gentleman was just on and on about how we would die. And I said, well, some people will if they don't get creative and innovative and read some history. You know, you can't Google it at this point. I hope you talk to your grandparents. But I want you to think about those negative thoughts, that ant infestation, and how much it invades your consciousness about what you're facing in life. I want you to think about what you need to do differently with those ants. You need to have a stomping party. Okay? You need to have a stomping party. Let's talk about how you have a stomping party. Affirmations. Now, those of you, and you don't have to comment, ladies, those of you who've known me for a while know that I'm sort of, I'm the glass is half empty girl. Okay? I'm the part that says, okay, let's problem solve this, but let's make sure that we look at the barriers before we look at the avenue. I learned that about myself a long time ago. And as I learned that, then I was better able to work with it. I see the negative in things. I have to compensate for that. I have to purposefully compensate for that. It doesn't come automatic, even after all of these years of practicing. You tell me a plan, and I can tell you every problem with it. I can. But as I accept that as my personality, I recognize the negative part of that. I purposefully compensate for it. And that's what we're going to have to do with our situation in these ants. And these ants can exist about any issue. Automatic negative thoughts are there, and they're stinking thinking habits. And we've known about them for years. Some of us practice them better than others. Some of us practice the affirmations better. If you have trouble practicing them, get you a list. Make a habit of posting it at work, at home, in some very obvious places. Have you talked to your computer today? Get up in the mirror. I mean, now I'm assuming, and I think the gentleman in the back probably does something in the mirror too, right?
Yeah.
My nephew is balding, and it takes him longer fixing his hair than it does me. So, okay, but in the mirror in the morning, do 2 or 3. Just make a habit of doing 2 or 3 affirmations about facing your day. Okay? Get your list, keep it where you can see it, and talk to yourself about it. Say it out loud in the mirror. If your spouse thinks you've lost it, okay, but do it. All right, so affirmations, meditations, prayer, spirituality, whatever is within your spirit. We all are spiritual beings in some way or the other. I'm not going to define your religion for you, but we're all spiritual beings. Spend time with that. That gets down to some of that core value stuff. It's real important. Have a way of expressing that. If it's church or volunteer work or prayer or Bible study or whatever other types of activities you might be that nurtures the soul of who you are. Another thing, what I said a few minutes ago, go outside and smell the flowers. Go down the road and list every color you see as you're driving along. Now, I don't mean do this because you've got to drive, okay? But, oh, there goes a blue car. Oh, there goes a white car. How many colors do you see? How many different types of trees? If you know anything about trees, there was 3 oaks. How many of you noticed the mimosas are coming back? You know, there was a number of years that we didn't have mimosa trees. Did you notice? There was a blight. But they're beginning to get more frequent now. I've been noticing driving down the freeway, there's, you know, you can go 2 miles and see at least 2, where for years you couldn't see any. So I want you to be attentive to the here and now. Don't be thinking about what you're going to say at the next meeting you're in, or what you're going to cook when you get home. Got time to figure that out when you get there. Spend some time just looking around and enjoying the moment. Think about what you're smelling. Use your 5 senses. That's another game I like to play. When I'm driving, it's like, what do I smell? What do I hear? What do I taste? Sometimes if it's been a long day, I don't want to think much about that. What do I feel on my skin? And I don't mean feelings emotional. I mean, what do I feel on my skin? You know, can I feel my toes in my shoe right now? What do you feel on the bottom of your feet? Just take a second. Think about it. What do you feel on your skin right now? So use your 5 senses to kind of get connected to the here and now. And then there's always those, and this goes back to going back to the ants again, because I want to give you some cues of how to recognize them. The what ifs, the if onlys, the shoulds and the shouldn'ts. And the whys I'd put in there because sometimes you just don't know why. Okay. So if onlys, the what ifs, the shoulds, the shouldn'ts, and the whys. Do we ever really know some of those answers? And whose should are we living by? My should or your should? I was in a Sunday school class back when I was at Bradley, and it was a Baptist Sunday school class, and I was teaching about shoulds and shouldn'ts, and I said, you know, a friend of mine told me that she'd been should on all her life. And that's the response I like. But this classroom didn't get the D on the end of that. And they just looked at me like stone-faced, you know, and I was horrified because I'd never had that happen. And I've used that a lot, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? I said, should. And then I got a little bit of a chuckle, but they still weren't amused. Okay. The next thing I want you to think about, your whole self. I was real impressed with Bill Clinton. He was coming out of the hospital, and he was on the news the other night, and he was talking about his heart attack years when he said, you know, I learned that I had to change my lifestyle. You know, I had to exercise, I had to eat right. He said, but it was more than that. He said, I had to learn to get enough sleep. Because, you know, sleep affects your health. And I was real proud that he put that in there because Dr. Jaggers keeps telling me, you got sucky sleep hygiene, Pat. You need to look. And how can you adjust your bedtimes? I went through some serious surgeries a few years back, and I couldn't sleep very well. And one of the things that I would do are the meditations when I would lay down. And I just kind of convinced myself that, you know, Pat, you may not be able to go to sleep, not like you did when you were 19 and you could sleep 23 of the 24 hours a day. But you can rest your body. And so I would go on many vacations in my head at 2 o'clock in the morning. And whenever I would start trying to get upset because I couldn't go to sleep, I would say, no, that's okay. You're just going to rest your body. And I got through those like 6 to 8 weeks. And I got some sleep, or I would have been psychotic. But, you know, I rested. And just by doing those exercises. There's a couple of good apps. If you're not good with meditation or imagery, trying to create relaxation, one of them is called Calm. It's all over Facebook now. They are starting to advertise there. Another one's Pacifica. I don't subscribe to them. I use their free sections, and those are just fine. So if you have a particularly anxiety-ridden day, or you're real stressed out, or you're really angry, do some of those guided meditations. They're just whole body kinds of things. I discourage people from doing, when they start counting backward, cut it off. They're practicing a pseudo hypnosis kind of thing, and I don't like that. I don't think you do that on the internet. But some of the meditations are guided imageries. Let's take a walk to your favorite safe place. And yes, I am talking about mind games because that's what we are. We live in our minds. Okay, and our whole life is guided by our perceptions. And as we start working on changing our perceptions, we start looking at resilience to get through whatever life hands us. I meant to bring it another little, I like little. It was a stump, probably a stump about this big around. And there was a tree growing up right in the middle of that stump. And the heading said, no matter what happens in life, you can always start over. This little tree is growing in the middle of this huge stump. I'm going to give you a sheet. It's called the ACE activities. I want you to practice it every day. The ACE activities, I want you to have an achievement for the day. Something that's a capstone. I mean, I know you're going to come in, you're going to check your calendar, you're going to go to your meeting. A capstone, an achievement, something you don't do every day. Okay? I don't want you to do it every day. It can't be the same thing every day. I want you to have one capstone every day, but don't do the same thing over and over again. I use this in some of my groups, and people kept coming in, they go the same, there's 3 of them, they do the same 3 every day, and I'm thinking, well, that's boring. That defeats the purpose. Okay, so I want you to, ACE activities, A, achievement, a capstone achievement for the day, something you're going to do this with. C, anybody want to guess what it is? Connect. I want you to connect. And I don't mean just, I'm going to go connect with my cat. I'm going to go connect with my husband. Well, I know you're going to do that. The cat's going to have to be fed. The husband's going to have to be fed. The wife's going to have to be, I don't know, what the husband's doing.
Don't tell her.
I won't. Okay, but I want you to connect with somebody. Reach out. You know, was there somebody in high school that you just wonder what they're doing? Reach out. Enjoyment is the E. Something every day that you just thoroughly enjoy, even if it's not for 15 minutes. That is just for you. It's not for everybody else. You're going to spend your day doing things for others. This is your nurture. Do something for you. These are the foundational things that help us to build resilience. And resilience helps us, when we keep that in our minds, it helps us to get through things like COVID-19. And that's what we've got to remember, that we are resilient and we can adjust. And we don't have to take all the losses. We're going to have some, but we don't have to take them all. I had this wonderful meeting with Zoom during the pandemic. I saw other people having dinner with other couples and families. And they just prop Zoom up, you know, and they would do it. Went to church by Zoom, and I loved it. I actually certified in CIT on Zoom. Okay. And we've done, I did a training on Zoom. You can educate and grow. We have a lot of tools. And if we just would be creative and work together about the pandemic, we can get through this. Yeah. Any worst parts for you guys of getting through the pandemic that you want to talk about? You want to pick my brain about anything? Questions?
Any suggestions for kids?
Same sorts of things, except you have to structure it. Their little minds do the same thing on just a age-appropriate level. And you have to structure their day more. I think it's the same for teenagers. I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to work harder at socializing. I know my great niece, she had to have help with keeping busy during the day when she wasn't in school. You know, and they did the televised thing for a bit, and she would be at my house and we would be doing it. And then afterward, it was like, okay, what now? So they have to have help with that. But I think it's the same sort of thing. The other part that I didn't talk about that's really good, not only for the kids, but for the adults too, is to be able to talk about what you're seeing, hearing, feeling, and thinking. When we, in adult children of alcoholics literature, they talk about the elephant in the living room that nobody's talking about. Well, just acknowledge it, it's there. COVID's there. You know, it's gonna be there. We're gonna do everything that we can. But talk about it is a big thing with kids. Not your perspective, but theirs. Listen more than you talk when you talk to kids, because they'll tell you what they really need to know. It's kind of like sex education with kids. You know, where do babies come from, mama? Y'all heard that story. And mama goes into the spiel about conception and all that stuff, when all the kid wanted to know was which hospital the baby's going to be born in. Learn to ask questions. Kids don't always want to know what we think they want to know. We've got to help them at their developmental age. Now, with the education that goes on in the social systems around, sometimes they're a little bit more educated than I was when I was their age. Sometimes we have to correct the myths. Okay.
I think the worst part for me has been more lately, like at the first when we were all isolated and we were closed for 9 weeks and you didn't know as many people who were dying. And lately, it's everywhere. Like it's close. It feels like it's closing in on you because you know more people that are dying. So that's been a harder part for me, I think.
The
Lately.
losses.
Yeah, so there's this like mixed feelings of, okay, we're back a little bit. Like I hosted some travel journalists this week and it was just great. I mean, I was exhausted, you know, totally out of habit, but it was so great to be able to host people and to share our community with them. But then at the same time, while they were here and I was hosting them, I probably heard of 3 people that died that I knew. Like one of them is my husband's cousin. And, you know, it's just very frightening.
It is. It is.
2 things relative to that. My daughter says that I have a bizarre perspective on death because my background was cardiopulmonary critical care, right? But I think that our culture has forgotten that death is a part of life. And that people cannot be kept alive forever. And we have, with medication and with surgeries and with extreme investment in physical care, we have kept ill people alive for a longer period of time. And so when something comes like this and they succumb, we think it is that disease, and it is. It's a combination of things. And the other thing is fear. And fear impacts our immune systems tremendously. And if I've had to deal with anything with my staff, it has been fear. When I was about 6, our home was destroyed, our farm was destroyed by a tornado. And as a result, my mother was very afraid of the weather, right? So about 2 years later, I was in the backyard with my older sister, who was in the house at the time it was destroyed. And I said, you know, my mom had said, oh, the weather's getting bad, blah, blah. And she said to me, I am not choosing fear. She said, if I was going to die because of a tornado, it would have been 2 years ago. So she said to me, don't choose fear. And that transformed my life, honestly, at 8 years old. And so am I saying there's never a time to be afraid? I'm not saying that. Although I was held at gunpoint in Houston one time. And I thought, that is the shiniest gun I have ever seen. I mean, it would have been more productive for me to say, maybe I should be afraid. But, you know, the point I'm making is you know, we do have choices like that.
Mhm.
And I have lost friends that I love dearly. But that is a part of life. It is.
It is.
Do we want it to happen? No. But to be so afraid of it, or to be so, to have such angst about it, impacts us physically also.
I think it does. I
Yeah,
think it
I
does.
know it does.
And what I have seen in the populations that I work with is people taking one of two positions. Either they're afraid and they do nothing, or it's not a problem and they don't do anything. They don't take precautions. I think we're intelligent people. We know how viruses are spread. We've had the flu for years. Okay. I don't know, where anybody stands on vaccine, but we've had vaccines for years. You can't get in school till you have your vaccines. Okay. And so I think I don't know. I've tried to figure out why everybody's so opposed to the vaccine. And I think there's just a tremendous political upheaval underneath that somewhere that's causing all the distrust. I don't know where any of you are with that, but if you don't want a vaccine, then take the other precautions, because the virus does spread. But you don't have to live in fear. You just have to live smart. You just have to live knowing we don't have all the information about this disease yet. We don't. We may never. It's kind of like cancer. For a long time, people thought you caught cancer. We learned you didn't catch cancer. Not the way we thought you did anyway. It's not contagious. Okay. But we have to use what we do know. And we do know. I watched some of those old Murdoch Mysteries. Anybody ever seen the Murdoch Mysteries? And his wife is a doctor back at the turn of the century, apparently. And she just does surgery on people with her hands with no gloves. And she does autopsies with no gloves. And I'm like, oh. But you think about the state of what was medicine back then? Did they know about germs back then? Did they know how things? No. We know now, so we wear gloves, we wear masks, we do those things because we are learning. And we're going to know more about this disease. We may not still know how to fix it, but we're going to know more about it, and we already know more in the last 2 years than what we started with. But don't live in fear. I was one of the first persons quarantined. Debbie Morales, anybody know Debbie? She lives up north, and she came down to visit. She came over to my house and we went out to eat. I didn't know that her daughter lived in Washington State and had come and met her in Chattanooga and had a sore throat. And this was right at the beginning of COVID. Everybody in their party got sick with COVID. Well, then that created the tracing back to where she had contact with us. And so we all had to go into quarantine. And I wasn't afraid. I was just bored. That was when I really had to practice the creativity part of things. But I don't advertise walk in fear. I haven't. I've gone to work every day. I've gone and done things that I needed to do, but I've done the precautions. I sit down. I've even gone to restaurants in the middle of this. The ones that were taking the appropriate precautions. There were some that I didn't because they weren't doing it, but that's what you do. That's what you learn to do is don't live in fear, but just live each day doing what you know is best for you and what's going to protect yourself and others. And I think we'll get through this. We'll be resilient. Other questions, comments? Thank y'all. Y'all been great.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for being here. This is our last Women's Council for 2021, and we have a steering committee. And if you have any suggestions for programs you'd like to see, we'd be happy to consider them for next year. We meet quarterly. So thank y'all for being here.
Pass those down.
Thank you.